In Japan, the long hot summer months are celebrated as the season of haunting, with the belief that the scariest of ghost stories will give you enough chills to eventually cool you down. Others will use this occasion to practice a tradition known as Kimodameshi, which translates in English to a liver test, meaning a test of courage. These tests usually involve the exploration of supposedly haunted locations, such as abandoned buildings or graveyards, during the dead of night to prove to oneself and others that they are brave enough to challenge the fear of the supernatural. Many young Japanese people have enjoyed this tradition for years, with no consequences other than a few sleepless nights. However, in May 1996, darkness would descend upon the land of the rising sun, as the Kimodameshi of two schoolgirls would leave the country with a new story that would change their season of haunting forever. On May the 5th, 1996, the last day of the Golden Week holiday season in Japan, two schoolgirls from Himi City, Toyama Prefecture, decided to take part in a Kimodameshi and test their courage at a supposed psychic spot. The term psychic spot in this instance actually has nothing to do with psychics, but is a translation from the Japanese phrase Shinrei Suppoto, which refers to supposedly haunted or cursed locations involving paranormal activity. Megumi Yashiki and Narumi Takumi, both 19 years old at the time, planned to travel to a notorious psychic spot in Uozu City, which is located roughly 35 miles east of Himi City. Several days prior to their trip, Megumi and Narumi spoke to friends at a local park who claimed to have recently travelled to the same spot to partake in a Kimodameshi. It's alleged that the girls had already visited the location twice before, although other reports suggest that they may have learned about the spot from a magazine article. After finishing a shift at her local store, Narumi purchased a pen light as well as some batteries for Megumi's flashlight in preparation for their evening trip to the haunted location. At approximately 9 p.m, both girls got into Megumi's car, a black Subaru Vivio, and began making their way to Uozu. Since it was the mid-90s and mobile phones weren't commonplace in society at this point, they sent a message to their families using a pager to explain that they were going to Uozu for a Kimodameshi. Midway along their journey, at around 9:30 p.m, they stopped off at Kayamaru Park in Imizu City for around 30 minutes to tell some friends what their plans were before continuing along the trip. At around 10 p.m, the girls were spotted refueling the car at a petrol station in Uozu before they left to continue into the moonlight. At around 11 p.m, one of the friends of Megumi and Narumi received a pager message from the girls saying, "We are in Uozu," suggesting that they had made it to their destination. Little did anyone know at the time, but these 4 words would mark the last time anyone would ever hear from the two girls from Himi City, as Megumi and Narumi, as well as their car, vanished into thin air. The psychic spot that Megumi and Narumi travelled to was this place, the Subono Spa Hotel. Located in a mountainous area of Uozu, the 6th-floor structure was supposedly a place where you could go to escape the busy city life and relax whilst overlooking the horizon of the Toyama Prefecture. Unfortunately, in 1982, the business went bankrupt and was left abandoned after the owner failed to find a suitable buyer. The cost of tearing down the building at the time was over 25 million yen, and therefore the city decided against removing it at such a fee and barricaded it up as best as possible. This led to the location becoming a hotspot for young adults and biker gangs, known as Bosozoku, who had used the hotel as a place where they could express havoc, vandalising the building, smashing windows and setting off fireworks inside. Despite plans to restore the property after a series of failed projects, the hotel stands isolated to this day, bruised and beaten, overlooking the city below. As years passed by, the lonely Suborno became a popular haunted hotel for people to test their courage and visit during the long summer nights. Two days after taking their trip to the hotel, after growing concern that the girls weren't coming home, the families of Megumi and Narumi reported them missing to the Toyama Prefectural Police. The initial search was focused around the Suborno, since this was the last known location that the girls had supposedly made it to before disappearing. They later expanded this search area after finding no evidence of anything belonging to the girls at the hotel, and began looking around the surrounding cliff areas with a helicopter to see if they had potentially fallen nearby. Unfortunately, no trace of the girls or their vehicle was found. Theorising that the girls may have decided to run away for personal reasons, the police stopped searching and the families waited for a month with no further developments on their whereabouts. The Toyama Prefectural Police decided to conduct two large-scale searches for the missing girls in June and October, beginning in Himi City and ending at the Suborno Spa Hotel. After covering several different routes between the two locations, police were unable to find any trace of the two. With nobody else coming forward with any sightings of the girls, it quickly became a national mystery. The disappearance of Megumi Yoshiki and Narumi Takumi became widespread news in Japan, and many people came forward with theories of what could have happened to the girls. The idea that they staged their disappearance and ran away together was strong at first, especially with the Toyama Prefectural Police, but it didn't explain the fact that neither the girls nor the car had been seen by anyone else since. Another theory revolved around the possibility of the girls getting into trouble with a Bosozoku biker gang, who were known for visiting the abandoned building previously. Bosozoku, which roughly translates to speed tribes, originates from the 1950s and refers to the Japanese subculture of biker gangs who ride heavily customised motorbikes. Taking inspiration from Western movies such as Rebel Without a Cause, Bosozoku biker gangs were notorious for being rebellious towards society, with some choosing a life of crime and vandalism. The theory broadly suggests that Megumi and Narumi encountered one of these gangs at the Suborno and were either abducted by them, or worse, murdered. Whilst not an impossible theory at the time, it was very implausible, and again, it didn't account for the missing vehicle and the fact that there was no evidence at the scene of the girls ever being there. One thing that was obvious to note when looking at their journey from Himi City to the Suborno Hotel was just how many areas of deep water lay between the two locations. With territories like the Toyama Bay and the Sho River along their route, it wasn't unreasonable to believe that the girls may have veered off-road at some point after their final pager message and met their fate in one of these places. However, with the potential search area being so vast, it was considered an almost impossible task to undertake without a definitive lead, and as such, they were not investigated thoroughly. Other theories that circulated included ideas of the girls being kidnapped by North Korean spies, which was actually happening in Japan to citizens in the early 1980s, to wildly supernatural and paranormal speculations which had no grounding in reality. With no other leads, the case would soon grow cold, and the mystery of Megumi Yoshiki and Narumi Takumi's Kima Dameshi would itself become a tale to tell during Japan's haunted summer months. That was until 24 years later. At midday on Wednesday the 4th of March 2020, Toyama Prefectural Police used the crane to pull a black Subaru Vivio wrapped in blue sheets from the seabed at Fushiki Port in Imizu City, located close to Kayomaru Park, where the girls had previously stopped during their journey. Inside the vehicle were the skeletal remains of both Narumi Takumi and Megumi Yoshiki, which was confirmed through DNA analysis. A petrol station credit card with the name Yoshiki Megumi embossed on it was also found in the car. Due to the length of time the two girls were exposed to the elements, the bodies had decomposed, meaning that forensics couldn't determine whether or not drowning was the cause of death, or if they had possibly died from other causes. With the car and bodies now found, the families of the two missing Himi City girls finally had closure on their fate, but the mystery of how they ended up in the water is not the only unusual part of this story. It turned out that, at the end of 2014, 3 people came forward to the Toyama Prefectural Police and claimed that they witnessed a car matching the description of Megumi's fall into the port on the night that they went missing. Police initially dismissed the claims, but decided to re-interview them again in January 2020. The 3 anonymous witnesses told how, at 12:30 AM on the night of the disappearance, they saw a black Subaru car with 2 female occupants inside parked along the edge of the cliffside at Kayomaru Park, with the car's rear facing the water. As they approached the car from the front to speak with the girls, the car suddenly started reversing and fell into the water. When asked why they never came forward before, all 3 witnesses said the reason for not doing so was because they were scared, possibly of being accused of being responsible for what happened. Police later determined that the deaths of the 2 girls was an accident. The identities of these witnesses remains unknown, and further speculation on whether or not foul play was involved and if their stories are 100% true still circulate to this day. What's certain though is that these witnesses definitely saw the last moments of Megumi and Narumi, and to not come forward with that information for over 18 years definitely opens up more questions. What's even more unusual, however, is the fact that the police sat on this information for a further 6 years themselves before they acted upon it, knowingly leaving the bodies of the 2 girls submerged underwater for over half a decade. A representative from the Juvenile Division of the Toyama Prefectural Police told reporters, "The alleged witnesses were interviewed multiple times. We know that the car fell into the sea for some reason, but at this time, foul play is not suspected." When asked if they would pursue a solution to the case, the Chief of Police himself told a magazine that, "We will investigate as needed in the future," leaving hope for answers bleak. Megumi's father himself appeared to have lost faith in the investigation, claiming, "I don't trust the witnesses at all. I don't know who they are. I have asked the police, but they won't tell me." So why did the police fail to act on this information? Why did the witnesses only come forward after 18 years? And how did the girls really end up meeting their fate? Whilst there may not be a definitive answer to all of these questions, there are definitely some strong theories. The girls sent their final pager at around 11 PM, stating that they were now in Uozu, and were confirmed to be seen heading that way from the sighting at the petrol station. The time it takes to drive from Subono Spa Hotel to Kayomaru Park is roughly an hour, which would mean that if they did make it to the hotel, they could have reasonably driven back to get to the park for around midnight, just 30 minutes before their car plunged into the water. With the suggestions from police reports that there was no evidence of Megumi and Narumi ever being at the Subono Hotel, it's possible that they decided to turn back not long after leaving the petrol station, perhaps deciding against visiting the spot entirely and driving back to a familiar area where they felt safe. It's also possible that, with the girls parked dangerously close to the edge of the port, they accidentally put their car into reverse gear after being spooked by the 3 witnesses approaching them, and by the time the accelerator was pushed, it was too late to correct their mistake. Maybe the 3 witnesses wanted to scare the girls as a prank, but when they realised it had backfired, they felt responsible and guilty for their actions, and all decided never to speak of it again until their conscience gave in and they finally came forward. Or perhaps the 3 witnesses did have something more sinister to do with their deaths, and sank the car into the port, hiding the evidence of their actions. With forensics unable to determine a cause of death due to the conditions of the corpses, it's not an impossible theory, but it doesn't explain why they would decide to come forward after so many years to report what they saw and allow the police to uncover the evidence. It could be that this was all a series of unfortunate circumstances, a freak accident with no intention of malice from anyone involved. But that still doesn't explain why the police reacted so slowly. Perhaps someone in the police was close to one of the witnesses and wanted to protect them. Or perhaps there was something more sinister and nefarious about the way these girls died. More details may arise surrounding the events of that fateful night, but for now, the mystery of Megumi Yoshiki and Narumi Takumi's Kimodameshi remains one of the most infamous unsolved cases in Japanese history. The internet is full of theories on what happened to the schoolgirls, and these will quite possibly be speculated on for years to come if no further information comes to light. The Subono Spa Hotel still stands in the Uozu Mountains, isolated from the rest of society and looming over the city from afar. Japan continues to tell stories of hauntings during the summer months, with the legend of the hotel now forever cemented in their folklore. Whilst the Subono remains as a derelict burden on the surrounding locals of the Toyama Prefecture, it can now finally serve a greater purpose, as a monument to remind us all of the lives of Megumi Yoshiki and Narumi Takumi. Thanks for watching the video. If you liked what you saw, then please do leave a like and subscribe to my channel. I just want to apologise as well that I did struggle quite a lot with some of the words in this video. I don't do very well with translating from Japanese either, so apologies to anyone if I have mispronounced or got any of those terms wrong in any way. If you do have any other stories that you want to share with me and you want me to cover, please get in touch. You can either leave a comment below or send me an email directly. It's just on my channel. Thank you.